So I would definitely say that today it's a euro crisis. And that is transformed into a crisis of confidence of the whole euro system itself, because it's the same currency. Sweden, in comparison to the Eurozone, has done pretty well. We have problems. We have high unemployment that I think is far too high. It's up to 7–8%. That's a big social problem. We have other problems in the economy. You can discuss the reasons for that and what to do about it, but I'll leave that out of this discussion. But Sweden's macroeconomic development has been very favorable compared to almost any Euro country, even compared to Finland that is so close to us. And I think there are three basic reasons for that, why Sweden is doing better. The first one is that we are free from the euro. For a long, long time we had lower interest rates than the Eurozone. Now we are starting to get higher interest rates. But during the time we had lower rates, it stimulated our economy. Now the Swedish economy is almost overheating. We have a growth of maybe 4, 5, 6% at this moment. And we need higher interest rates. At the point where the crisis hit in 2008, the Swedish krona went down compared to the dollar, compared to the euro. Now it goes up again. And it works quite well. Stimulated export. We are a very export-dependent country at the time when we needed it. Now it holds back a little bit, because which is also quite good for this, I would say, present economic development. Secondly, why the Swedish economy has been strong is that we had very low public deficit in our spending. We had a banking crisis in the 90s that was very painful for Sweden. We had to take over most of the banks to the government, and we sold them out again.
Excuse me, what is a very low?
Public debt. We went from at some 70% of GDP in debt in the 1998 to now 35%. So we halved the debt. Of course, that had a price. It had a social price, and you can discuss the way it was done. But there is no question about it that is a strength in this situation, not to be forced to borrow money, not to be forced to go and negotiate with those bankers around the world that will put up conditions for you and your policy, what to do and what not to do. If we don't want to sell the Swedish bonds, we don't have to. We can do it ourselves. That, of course, especially from my left-wing perspective, is a strength, because then there's not IMF or the EU or someone else telling you what to do, but you can actually decide that yourself. Thirdly, we learned from the banking crisis in Sweden in the 90s that you have to put restrictions on the bank. And you have to make the banks pay for their mistakes. If the lesson learned to the banks is that someone else will pay for you, then they will do the same mistakes over and over and over again. And there were some mistakes, especially in the Baltic states, by the Swedish banks, but overall, compared to other countries, it's very limited. So we didn't have to pay a lot of money to the banks down in Sweden. And this, I would say, is something that is different from most of the Euro countries. So what will happen now? Well, I think that some people think that the crisis is over. I think that is wrong. It's over-optimistic. I think we are just in a calmer stage for a couple of months or weeks, then the crisis will go on. And as I said before, after Greece and Ireland, most likely we'll see Portugal and Spain. Spain is the first large country in the EU that will have problems in financing its debt. And many people thought that with the euro you can't speculate any longer. That's been proved to be all wrong. Now you speculate against the bonds, the national bonds of each country, and you put up the interest rates for borrowing money up to a high level until the countries can't pay any longer. So the whole idea of the euro making it impossible to speculate was a mistake or misunderstanding, you could say, if you want to be kind. From our perspective, we've been willing, from my political party, we've been supporting the loans for Iceland and Latvia. We don't like that we take 6% interest rate. We think that's far too high and not a sign of great solidarity if you say that. But if the country wants to borrow money, we think it's right to do it. We said no to Ireland because we think that the social effects of the Irish loan were just too severe. The cuts were too heavy to common people, and it was not a social profile that we could be accepting. But I think there will be more requests, Portugal coming up soon, Spain maybe in the future, and there might be a day when the big Eurozone countries no longer wants to pay, especially Germany. It's starting to become an issue in the national political debate, and that's where the Euro system might not function any longer, when it might collapse. I think there is no exaggeration to say that it is a substantial risk for the whole Eurozone to collapse as one single currency area. Besides these huge packages of help to these countries, there's been something else happening, and that's been the European Central Bank breaking all the rules they have. Because there is a part of the treaty of the European Union saying there is no bailing out. There's no way the European Central Bank should go into and help individual countries, and that's exactly what they've been doing now. The European Central Bank has been buying bonds for, the last time I saw the figures, probably it's more now, 73 billion euros, just to buy bonds from Portugal, Ireland, others, so they could finance their loans. They've also been borrowing money to the banks that are in crisis. They borrowed, the last figure I saw, 330 billion euros to banks, most of the time at the 1% interest rate, to try to save the banking system from collapse in different countries. One could think for a moment about why does Germany and other countries want to save Ireland and Greece and Portugal, when so many economists said that sooner or later they would have to cut down. They would have to do an Argentina like in 2001, say we cannot pay any longer. Sorry guys, we have to negotiate this and make a deal to write down our debt. The thing is that who is owning the debt of this country? It's the big banks in France and Germany that owns the debts of Greece and Portugal and Spain and Ireland. So what is happening now is that the public money and the money from the ECB goes in, buy the bonds, take over the risk from the private speculators that can go out of the business with a profit. So you move the risk from the private to the public. And that is the whole thing that is happening, for example, in Ireland, that you make private profits and then you make the public pay in the end. And that, I think, is something that is totally unacceptable. And I know we have this discussion as well in Iceland, what the price is of this crisis. This is now in the EU more and more becoming a political crisis. Because in the countries that have a strong trade unions, let's say Portugal and Greece, for example, this is meeting strong social resistance. General strikes, manifestations, demonstrations, political uprising, etc. In countries without a strong labor movement, like in Latvia, there is not much heard, but of course there's a great suffering for the people that have to bear the burden of these crises. The only answer from the European Union is really, you have to cut down. You have to cut down public spending, you have to go deep down to the welfare system. The European Trade Union Association has also pointed out the fact that now the EU goes in and says you have to renegotiate or even just get rid of the agreements between the workers and the employers and lower wages and cut different kinds of benefits. It goes deep into the democratic system and the free negotiating system between trade unions and employers in many countries. But in the European Union, the political leadership is very well aware that this will probably not be enough. To be able to have a single currency in the long run that is functioning decently, you need a common economic policy. You need a common policy of taxation, of budgets, of rule concerning banks, of lending, borrowing, pensions, how to make the wages, etc. And this is exactly where the European Union is now. There is a package of different legislative proposals that goes through the Council in rapid speed for the moment, how to centralize the finance policy, the taxation policy, the control of the national budgets that go through the European Union. Just the other week at the European Council, Germany and France put on the table a brand new proposal, took everyone by surprise, said that we want to ban certain forms of wage negotiations, go directly into the independence of the country. We want to have a single age of retirement in the European Union. Let's see. We want to change the constitution in the individual member states to prohibit them from borrowing money in certain ways. There is such a ban in Austria and Germany, for example. And there were some other things. This goes deeper and further than the European Union ever has gone before. So what is happening now, that under the pressure of the crisis of the currency, EU is rapidly moving to United States of Europe, to a political union. Because if the power over the budgets goes to the European Union, you move the primary tool of the national democracies to conduct policy. You move that from the national democracies to the not very democratic institutions of the European Union, the European Commission, etc. And this is it's like a silent revolution going on now in the European Union. And I think in one way the conclusion that the euro will probably not survive if you don't centralize political powers in this way, it might be right. But then the question is it a price worth paying? Is it a price worth paying for our democracy? Is it a price worth paying for our welfare states, etc.? And this is, I think, where the European Union stands now. And even though the European Union tries to do this, it is not sure that they will succeed. I think that maybe it will be a situation where parts of the European Union will be doomed to be in a sort of permanent economic crisis for quite some time to be, while the German economy is doing very well. Even if you send money, even if you force them to cut the budgets, etc., it will be very difficult for them to get out of the crisis. I think we're only seeing the start of this. So what is the alternative? Well, for me, there are many parts of the alternative. First of all, the Swedish lesson learned, and I know that the debate on Iceland is totally different, is that being free from the euro has been the biggest asset that we have. If we had been into the euro, we would have had lower growth, higher unemployment, and greater economical difficulties. It might even be that you should now start to think of how to divide the euro in many currencies, because the alternative might be worse, that it breaks down, and that could. It's very hard to predict the economic consequences of that. So why not think of dividing the euro? Why not realize that this was a big mistake made? And I think you have to open up that discussion. And I think it will come, for example, the speaker of the Slovakian parliament, Slovakia joined the euro just recently, a month ago said that we have to think about the plan B to recreate the Slovakian krona. It's reaching the point where this is publicly discussed in EU countries. Secondly, we have to learn the lesson from the banking sector, that we have to control the banks. We have to have rules for the banks that makes the bank do what they are supposed to do. Lending money for investment, for private persons and for production. And we have to put restrictions on these very speculative financial systems, because otherwise the system could kill itself. And on the road, also limit the democracies and our possibilities to build welfare. There are certain proposals going through the EU system right now, because people in the EU realize that, of course, we have to have stricter rules on the banks. There are also global arrangements like the Basel III rules and others. And I think that this is absolutely necessary on the national level and on the international level. Thirdly, what is happening now in the EU is that the public take the risks while the banks often can go away with the profit. I think that the banks will learn nothing from that. There has to be, when the day comes that the countries no longer can pay the debts, a division of the cost between the private banks that have been speculating in the debt and the public that will also have to pay and suffer in many ways. Because it's simply not acceptable that the banks can walk away from the party and still have the profit after creating the problems. If the EU will get any kind of political acceptance among its peoples for the changes that are coming now and the price of this crisis, there has to be a socially just and acceptable profile of who is bearing the burden. And you also need to invest. You need to invest in green technology, education, new jobs, communications, because you cannot only starve, you have also to invest for the day after the crisis to build up the economy and create employment. I think we also have to think about how we use the public's funds for our pension money, for example, that they are not used in a way that makes the crisis worse than they actually are. And this, I would say, the way I see the solution of the crisis, the way out, is contradictory to the way the EU chooses now, because it's built, the main purpose of the policy in the EU now is to save the euro at any cost, and the cost is very high. Thank you.